So, good evening, all of you. My name is Priyanka, and those who have already attended the previous sessions would know that I am taking sessions on Indian economy for IPM IAS Academy. And as part of the same, we have begun these sessions by getting into the foundational knowledge of economics. So, last week, we had sessions related to chapters in grade 9. Grade 9 is where students start learning about economics in the NCERT. And like UPSC exam aspirants always say, or when the preparations happen, NCERT textbooks form the foundational knowledge for every topic in the UPSC exams. So we have started the session by getting into the fundamental aspects in economics. Last week we had sessions where grade 9 chapters were completed, and today I'll be beginning with chapters in grade 10. So there are 5 chapters in grade 10, which gives another aspects to economics or discusses another aspects to economics. And for the students, especially who are from non-commerce or non-economics background, this session should be helping. So and the coordinators of IPM IAS Academy have let me know that compared to the earlier sessions, this is actually an open session for many students. So from my side and from the side of IPM IAS Academy, I welcome all of you to the session, especially the members who have come for the opening session, like open session. So I welcome you all. And today, as I said, we'll be getting into some of the chapters in grade 10 of NCERT textbook. So if anybody of you do not have the NCERT textbook, you can just directly go to the NCERT site and filter the subject wise and area wise and grade wise thing, and you will get these chapters, PDF copy, color copy itself. So you can just go through it after the session is done, which will help you to reinforce what the things that we have covered today. So welcome you all again to the session, and let us begin. So I'll be sharing my screen. Please let me know if the screen is not visible for you, beginning with the first chapter in grade 10 of NCERT textbook. So in grade 10, the first chapter talks about development, the aspect called development. Now, whenever this topic comes, the economical aspects come, or the subject called economics comes in for a nation or for the world economy, this term called development stands very important. It's like whether your country is developed or whether your society is developed, or is it underdeveloping, or is it a developing economy? Why is it underdeveloped if it is so? Why is it a developing country if it is so? And why do you call certain nations as developed economies? Why is certain society called as developed while another society is not developed? So this is what we are learning in this chapter. So I'll be taking the main aspects of this chapter. I won't be getting into each and every line of the chapter, but the main crux of this chapter is that it says development is something that differs from people to people, and it differs from nation to nation. For example, take the case of a farmer and take the case of an employee working in an IT sector. And let's take another one scenario of a person who is running a business. So we have 3 people, very common people, that common category of people that we see in our society. One is a farmer, one is a person employed, a salaried person in the IT sector. IT sector is just an example that I took. So it's a salaried person, and we have one more person who is in business sector. So when you look at the farmers, what they will be aiming is, they'll be aiming for a higher income and better crop cultivation, and to be able to send their children to the nearby government schools, because they might not be able to afford a private school, but sometimes they even think about sending their children to nearby private school. So that will be the development aspect or the development goals that farmers would be thinking about. But when it comes to a salaried person in the IT sector, what they will be thinking is not in terms of just money. They'll be thinking to gain a better income, but at the same time to gain a designation or a job where they are valued for their contributions, where they have equality say if this IT employee is a female, so that female employee would not just be demanding for a better salary, but she will be also looking for a workplace which gives equality to her and where she is included in every aspect, where there is no kind of discrimination happening. So for such an employee, development aspect will constitute the monetary aspect as well as the non-monetary or the non-materialistic things like equality, non-discrimination, etc. For a business person, which is the third example that I took, for a business person, development would be like acquiring a luxurious asset or a luxury car or setting up of a big factory, giving employment opportunities to a larger community and doing some philanthropy. So certain business people or certain entrepreneurs focus on philanthropy to a very large scale because they think what they have to contribute to the society. So for a business person thinking in such manner, development will include, definitely he is a businessman. If he is a well established business person, he will be definitely generating a good amount of income, but at the same time his development goals have changed from just income to setting up of a factory and giving employment opportunities to a large community, and at the same time focusing on philanthropy. So development, as you can see, is varying from one person to another, and it can vary from one nation to another also. For example, developmental aspects of India need not be the developmental aspects of any other country. So India will be having its own goals, while another country, take the case of our neighboring countries like China, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc., they will be having their own development goals. So the basic thing about development that we need to understand in economics is that it differs from person to person, it differs from society to society, and because of this, it differs from nation to nation. So that is the introduction aspect covered in this chapter. And also, development is not an individual thing. Like, for example, if the society has to develop, each and every person in the society has to contribute his or her developmental aspects into the society. For taking the case of India, if I want to be developed, I should also focus on individual development as well as my contribution towards the society. What am I contributing to my country so that I can make India into a developed nation from a developing nation? So it is a vice versa activity. So if I need to develop, my country has to develop. And at the same time, if my country has to develop, I should also be contributing something to this. So that's what is depicted in this small picture, which says, without me, they cannot develop. In this system, I cannot develop. So we are all part of a society, which is a system. And if the society has to develop, without me, they cannot develop. And without that system, I cannot develop. So it's a two-way process. So when we as human beings or when we as society members talk about development or we complain about development, say that the government is not doing this thing, the government is not doing like that, we should also understand that it is not just the government or the nation that is contributing to the developmental aspect. We as individuals or society members are also contributing to it. So that's an important thing that everybody should understand about development of an economy. And like I said, this chapter gives lots of activities where goals are categorized into persons. And for example, I'll just take the case of table 1.1, which is given in the textbook. So for landless rural laborers, developmental goals will be like more days of work and better wages. Local school is able to provide quality education for their children, and there is no social discrimination. So these things will be part of their development goals. But take the case of a rich girl from a rich a girl from a rich urban family. So she would think about achieving more freedom like her brother, because maybe she is not getting freedom like the male participants in the family. And she thinks like if she wishes like she is able to decide of herself what she wants to do. Nobody is taking decision for her in her life. She is able to stay independent. So that's all part of development goals. So development goals includes the material thing as well as non-material things. That's what the stable example has given. And As you can see, there is a picture. So this is one thing that I also found quite striking, because sometimes when we pass through certain people, we say, oh, those people don't want to develop. Like when we see people on the footpath, we may think, or if there are people working in the unorganized sector, like who work in the, we will talk about unorganized sector in the upcoming chapters. So people in the unorganized sector, when we pass by, we generally make a comment, oh, these people do not want to develop, or why are they not focusing on development? But this is where the concept of development differs. Like this chapter says, different persons have different kinds of developmental goals. So one should not be commenting on the other person's development goal on in short. So in this picture, that person who is riding a car, his developmental goal would be like something aiming a richer lifestyle or a better lifestyle. But for that lady with a child, for her, the developmental goal could be a very minimal thing, like having a shelter and having the facility, her from the natural calamities or the rain, etc. So she might be thinking about a safe shelter and a better education system for her children. So it differs from one person to another, which is very well shown or depicted with the small little picture. And when it comes to countries, so when we say people have different goals and different aspects in development, but there needs to be a standardized way in which we analyze whether a country or a society is developed or not. And that is where the income part is generally taken into consideration. So when income comes, like for what people desire in a community are generally employment facilities. Employment facility implies getting regular work and regular wages for the work. And coming to the farmers, they would demand for a fair price or a decent price for their crops, irrespective of the market fluctuations. And like every person is demanding for a better income as part of their. So income is definitely part of the development goal of every individual and every society. And apart from that, nowadays, when we have come into this 21st century, more than the income, there are other aspects such as discrimination, equality, diversity, inclusion, freedom, and security, and more apart. Besides all over this, respect for each other. These have all been part of the developmental goals of every individual and society. So when we combine or take a general criteria, apart from income, non-discrimination, diversity and equality, inclusion, respect, and security and freedom have also been part of developmental goals in today's world. So concluding this, once again, developmental goals includes monetary and non-monetary or materialistic and non-materialistic things in our life. So this means development is a mix of goals, just taking the main wordings from this chapter. So for development, people look at a mix of goals, and it's not about income, but also for the important things. So for each and every person, important thing is life is different. So developmental goals that people have are not only about better income, but also about other important things in life. Now, coming to national development, like I said, when we are analyzing a country or a society, what constitutes development, or how are we going to categorize countries into underdeveloping, developing, and developed nations? So for this, generally the income aspect is taken into consideration, and the term that we normally use is national income. Now, what is national income and other things? We will have a separate session in upcoming days. But coming to a country, when we take the number of population, the entire population, each and every person will be earning a particular income. So if you add up the entire income of every member in the country, it gives into the total income of the country. But total income is not exactly a good indicator of developmental aspect of a society. So what we do is we normally take the total income of a country, which is derived by adding up the income earned by every member in that particular country or the society, and then we divide it by the total population. So total income divided by total population. This gives per capita income. This is a term called per capita income. So it means the capital derived by each and every individual contributing to the income part of the society. So it's called per capita income, and per capita income is an indicator of developmental aspect of a society. So when you think about, or when you read about countries, categorizing them into developed nation, developing nation, or underdeveloped nation, you can see that this term called per capita income is shown everywhere. On the basis of per capita income is what these countries or states are categorized as developed or underdeveloped or developing. Now, this can happen within the states of an economy also. So in India, we have different states, and though India is a developing country, it does not mean that all its states are in the same pathway. So some states would be already in a developed situation in the country, while there are states which are underdeveloping due to many reasons, and there may be states who are progressing, who are in a developing stage. So there also we look at the per capita income contributed by these states. So what we do is we divide the total income of the state divided by the total population of the state. In India, that's how we calculate. And based on this per capita contribution by each state, we compare the states, like which state is in a developing pathway and which state is still underdeveloped in our country. So intuitively, income of the country or income of the states is definitely a major aspect for deriving at the developmental or developmental goals of a country. But at the same time, it should also consider other aspects. Even in this comparison, today's data shows that apart from income, there are other aspects like quality of education, healthcare facilities, etc., provided by a state, which should also be taken into consideration while comparing it, or the states as well as countries, comparing it with each other. So I hope till now what I have said is clear to you. So countries with per capita income, as per the global index, countries with per capita income of $49,300 per annum and above, as per the 2019 index. If you look at the charts, every country which has earned a per capita income of above $49,300 is categorized into high income or rich countries, which includes countries like USA, UK, etc., Germany, etc., and countries which have a capital income, per capita income of 2,500 or less $US are called low income countries. And it is actually shocking to find that India is still categorized into the middle income or lower middle income countries as per the 2019 index, because its per capita income was just $6,700 per annum. So it's between 2,500 and 49,300. So India has not reached closer to 49,300 $US per annum, which is why it is still in a path towards developed economy, and it's not a high income or a rich country. It is still in a middle level, that too in a lower middle income category in across the countries in the world. Now, if we want to take India more forward, we as society members should be contributing it. That's where our developmental goals also play an important part in taking our society or the country forward. Now, there is a chart, a table 1.3. If you can see, this is the 2020-21 economic survey done and by the central government, and states Haryana, Kerala and Bihar. They have taken the case of Haryana, Kerala and Bihar. So Haryana has a per capita income in 2018-19. The per capita income of Haryana was rupees 2,36,147. And for Kerala, it was 2,04,105. When it comes to Bihar, the per capita income of the state was only 40,982. So when we look at the table 1.3, the figures in table 1.3, we can directly understand that Haryana is having a higher per capita income, and therefore we may assume that Haryana is in a better position than other states like Kerala and Bihar. This is just for a comparison. They have taken these three states. So there are other states also coming in between them. But when you look at Haryana's figures, we might feel that that state is progressing or in a better situation than the other two. But at the same time, we have another table table 1.4, which gives some more other details about these states. So when you look at the infant mortality rate per 1,000 live births, literacy rate, and the net attendance ratio. So in table 1.3, we were looking at the per capita income. And in table 1.4, some other indicators have also been added, which includes infant mortality rate, literacy rate, and the net attendance ratio. So infant mortality rate is the number of children that die before the age of 1. At a proportion of 1,000 per 1,000 live children. So in that particular year, in 2018, when you look at Haryana, the infant mortality rate per 1,000 live birth is 30. And in 2017-18, the state has shown a literacy rate of 82%. Net literacy rate, I would hope everybody knows, and net attendance ratio per 1,000 people, that too in a secondary stage, like age 14 to 15 years. That's where we get into the secondary stage of our education. So when we look at the net attendance ratio of students aged between 14 and 15 in 2017-18, only 61% ratio has been registered in Haryana. But when you look at Kerala state, you can see that the infant mortality rate is only 7 per 1,000 in 2018, and the state has a literacy rate of 94% in 2017-18. The net attendance ratio in the state of secondary education, like 14 to 15 years aged children, 83% of that category of children are attending secondary stage education. Coming to Bihar, the infant mortality rate per 1,000 live birth in 2018 was 32. So 32 out of 1,000 live births are dying actually. So, and literacy rate is 62%, which is lower than Haryana and Kerala. And when you look at the net attendance ratio, it is only 43%, which means not even half of these children aged between 14 and 15 are attending secondary education. Now, when you add the net or add these two tables, information in table 1.3 and 1.4, you can understand that Haryana, though it is on a higher level in the per capita income, the infant mortality rate, literacy rate, and net attendance ratio of Haryana is lower than Kerala. Or compared to the other two states, Kerala stands in a better position in terms of its infant mortality, literacy rate, and net attendance ratio. So when we combine the details, we can say that Kerala is actually having a better position than Haryana. So, and definitely Bihar is standing at the third position when compared to Haryana and Kerala, because it has a very low per capita income, which is not even half of the other states. And the infant, apart from that, the infant mortality rate is also high, literacy rate is comparatively low, and the net attendance ratio is not even 50%. Now, why is this infant mortality rate being considered important? Because you need to understand that when 32 among 1,000 live births are dying before the age of 1, which means the younger generation who are going to take the state forward or make the state prosper in the future are not alive. Only remaining 68 live births are there, out of which, again, the literacy rate and net attendance ratio will determine whether they are going to contribute to the state or not. So, to sum up, what we are intending with these two tables is that per capita income is definitely an indicator to the developmental aspect of a society or a state or a country. But at the same time, development also includes the state's or the country's contribution or its vigilance or its attention towards aspects which improves their human index. Now, for those who have already attended my previous class, grade 9, we had a chapter called People as Resources. So there we had discussed that to convert people as resource, the government should be investing into their health, education, and training aspect. So only when the people in a society develop into proper resource, they will be able to contribute to the societies or the states or the nation's development and thereby take it forward. And thereby the society in itself can excel. So we need to understand that the basic fundamental aspects that lead to development are definitely the human index, the human population or the people as a resource. They contribute largely to the development of a society. So therefore, the government should be very much vigilant about their contribution and their attention to the health, education, welfare, nutritional aspects, and the safety and security that it gives to its resource or its human population, which are otherwise called the resources, human resources. And public facilities. So that is where these public facilities include health and education sector. So when we look at Bihar, taking this table 1 data and table 1.4, Bihar has an infant mortality rate of 32 per thousand, literacy rate is 62% only, and the net attendance ratio is only 43%. So we might think that people are not interested to go or send their children for higher education, and maybe it might be from the people's aspect that the infant mortality rate is getting higher. But at the same time, think in the other way. What if the government is actually not providing good education facility or good public facilities over there? What if the hospitals are not having adequate number of doctors and nurses? Or what if the hospital or the medical infrastructure in such state is very poor that limits people to go there? What if there is no system which ensures a healthy delivery of a baby in that particular state? So there comes the responsibility of a government to focus on public health facility, and at the same time education also. What if in a state like I'm taking the case of Bihar because it's given only 43% of net attendance ratio is happening over there in 2017-18. So what if the students actually want to go, but there is no particular good facility, good schools available over there? What if the infrastructure is so bad that students cannot even attend the classes? What if the teacher quality is very low in the state? So all these aspects would also determine the net attendance ratio, and that is where like public facilities provided by the government plays a vital role in the developmental goals of a society. So the most important public facilities that every government should be focusing is on the health and education facilities that it provides to the citizens, to its citizens. So the citizen should also be able to access better goods and services, have better income, and also be able to overcome any issues related to their health and educational aspects. So these are the things discussed in the earlier part of this chapter. Now, there are certain tables which it's not important as UPSC aspirants. Every aspect in this chapter does not count important. I'm just taking the important thing. So human development report. These days, when you go to the governmental sites or the development indicators, you can see a term called human development report. So human development report includes health and education indicators also, and UNDP is the authority that prepares it. Human development report is published by UNDP, and it compares countries based on the educational levels of the people, their health status, and the per capita income. So these three indicators have become important in today's world for determining a country and its development. Now, table 1.6 shows some data regarding India and its neighboring countries. So Sri Lanka, taking the case of Sri Lanka, the gross national income per capita in 2011 was $12,707. Life expectancy at birth is 77. Mean years of schooling, like people aged about 25 and above, it's 10.6, and HDI rank in the world is 73. While India, with all this large population and facilities of factors of production and a good amount of resources. The national income, the life expectancy of birth, mean years of schooling, as well as the HDI rank is very lower than Sri Lanka. So you can just imagine how even a small country like Sri Lanka can excel than India. So this is 2011 data. 2021-22 data is different. When you prepare for your examinations, you can just go and check what is the status of India. Has it progressed from 2011, or is it still the same? So and especially with regards to the neighboring countries. So Nepal and Bangladesh, just taking the example of Nepal and Bangladesh, the life expectancy of birth in Nepal is 70.8 and Bangladesh it is 72.6, while in India it is only 69.7. So even such indicators can be indication to the health facilities provided by our country. So these things you can just go through. This is changing as per 10 years data. This is from 2019 data, which has been presented in table 1.6. But ultimately, what the chapter aims to provide you, the knowledge that this chapter gives us, income, health, and education facilities should be part of the developmental goals of every society. And it is through these three indicators that we now categorize countries and societies as underdeveloping, developing, and developed nations, and even emerging nations. There is a new concept called emerging nations. All these are based on these indicators. And finally, there is one more thing that the recent periods have started. In the recent periods, there has been a large importance being given to sustainability, a concept called sustainability. So maybe some of you might have heard this term and know about this term, but what sustainability means is we are actually blessed to have a previous generation who has not exploited all the resources. But in the current environment, a large amount of natural resources are getting depleted. Groundwater is reducing, pollution is increasing, natural resources are getting disrupted, forests are getting like wiped out of our planet. And if this continues, maybe we as the current generation will be in a better facility, but the upcoming generations will not have a better world to live in. Maybe they'll have large amount of income but nothing else. So that is why we have started, or nations have started, focusing on the aspect called sustainability. So the sustainability concept is that we have not inherited the world from forefathers, we have borrowed it from our children. So it is our responsibility to keep this planet and its resources safe in such a way that upcoming generations are also able to benefit out of it. So sustainability aspect is getting added to developmental indicators in these days, and countries which are, and that is why when you read countries like UK and Japan, etc., are focusing a large on sustainability aspect. Even the population over there are thinking about sustainability aspect. They are trying individually and as a society, they are trying to bring down the negative impacts on climatic changes. And recently in India, or in many of the states in India, we have started avoiding plastics, because government in itself has understood that plastic is going to destruct our environment, and there has been strict regulations which impose like these kinds of plastic covers are totally banned, and carrying them will take you a fine of so and so rupees. And these days, since I am from Kerala, I can say that we have biodegradable covers available nowadays, and I can't find the 30 micron or less plastics now available in any shops, and even if I carry, I would be fined. So these are all part of sustainable development in our society. So I can say, being an Indian, of course, India is also thinking about sustainability aspect, and we have just begun our journey. And this is a very new indicator. We have yet more to go as a globe and as a world, in the global economy as well as in the Indian economy. We have a large way to go forward. But as individuals, we must start thinking about sustainability aspect also in our personal development goals. So with this, we come to the end of the first chapter. Any doubt? Is this development aspect clear for all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
So I hope we can get into the second chapter. Now, this is a very common chapter that we have come across in almost all our classes, in our lower classes, but we need to gain more insights to the sectors of Indian economy. Now, why is sectors important for Indian economy especially? Because it is these sectors that decide how far we have gone in the development aspect. So it is connected to the previous chapter. And like we all know, there are mainly three sectors in our country. One is the primary sector, one is the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. Those who have attended my session in the previous week would have learned about primary, secondary, and or discussed. We have discussed about primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. But just to take a summary of what we have learned previously, primary sector is basically the sector where there is no conversion of raw materials happening. So whatever is got from the nature, it is being used in the same manner. We are not converting it into any new form, or we are not adding any chemical processes or manufacturing processes to convert the raw material into an entirely new product. So primary sector basically constitutes the agricultural sector of our country. So it produces natural goods. Basically, primary sector is the sector which produces natural goods, milk, milk and dairy, fishery, forestry, etc. are all part of the primary sector. Now, there is the next sector, which is the manufacturing sector. It is also called secondary sector and industrial sector because it's mainly about industries. What they do in the secondary sector is they take the raw materials from the primary sector. It gets processed through many kinds of manufacturing facilities, and a final good or a product is being developed. So industrial activities are more in secondary sector, and that is why secondary sector is also called as the industrial sector of our country. So that is the sector where raw material is actually getting converted into some kind of finished goods. For example, take the case of chairs that we use. So the raw material is actually wood, but wood as such is part of the primary sector. When it comes to the manufacturing unit, the wood is processed with many kinds of facilities and many kinds of added benefits into it, and thereby furnitures or chairs are produced. So chair is actually a fine finished good, which is actually part of manufacturing industry or the industrial sector. So that comes in the secondary sector. Now there are facilities which are required to take this finished good to the ultimate consumers. That is being taken care by the tertiary sector. So tertiary sector is generally called as a service sector in our country. That's because they don't produce any new product or product as such, or there is no finished good which is being produced in the tertiary sector, but they take the finished good which has been produced by the industrial sector or the secondary sector to the ultimate consumers. And also there are other services which are required to take the economy as towards the a better development stage. For example, education. Like I am taking this session for you. This is actually a service that I'm doing called teaching. Teaching is actually part of the tertiary sector or the service sector. So service sector is one of the largest contributor to Indian GDP in these days. And when you just take a note of, or when you just observe around, you can see that there are large number of people now coming into tertiary sector because tertiary sector is expanding at a very large scale in our economy these days. Because for example, if the goods are being produced, there needs to be warehousing facilities. There needs to be a transportation facility to take this finished good to the consumer. We need insurance. These days, insurance have become very important for individuals as well as business people to keep their health and their goods, whatever we hold. And for the business, definitely the goods, they need to keep it protected. So insurance has become a very important thing in our day-to-day life. Insurance and communication, like I can take the session where I am in my remote location and you can attend the session at your location only because we have a very advanced telecommunication facility, internet facility available. So communication is another service that we are entailing in these days. It's all part of tertiary sector. And when we look at the previous 3 to 4 decades of Indian economy development, we can see that contribution of agricultural sector is comparatively reducing, while the contribution of tertiary sector is actually increasing. So towards the GDP of our country, which is the gross domestic product of our country, and therefore we find service sector to be one of the important sectors in our economy. We are learning about Indian economy's sectors, so just make a note that tertiary sector is now the largest contributor to the GDP of our country. While primary sector also holds is important, but it has just fallen to the second place in the last 2-3 decades. Now we have there is a chart. So GDP by primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. In 1973-74, we can see that primary sector was a little more contributing than the secondary and tertiary. But when it came to 2013-14, the blue one is primary, the red one is secondary, and the green one is tertiary. So you can see between 1973-74 and 2013 and 14, the contribution of tertiary sector to the Indian GDP has tremendously increased, which is what I was discussing. So tertiary sector is now by far the largest contributor of GDP of our country. Now, that does not mean that we have a large number of people employed in tertiary sector. It only means that the value or the income generated or the addition of income by this sector to the GDP has increased. Even now, a large number of people in our country is still employed in primary sector, mainly because 60 to 70% of Indian population are still living in rural India, and majority of them are farmers, and because of which agricultural sector is still the largest sector in which this is a sector in which largest number of people are employed in our country. But despite their employment also, tertiary is contributing largely to the GDP. Is this aspect clear to all of you? Like primary holds the largest number of employment, while tertiary holds largest value contribution to the GDP. Is that clear? I just want to make sure that it's not confusing. Maithili, Devanandana, who have already attended my session. Is that clear? Yeah, Maithili says yes. Okay. So why is tertiary sector contributing more towards our economy, and why is agricultural sector still holding large number of employment in our economy? That is also being discussed in this chapter. So one of the main reason why tertiary sector is contributing to our economy is because there is more demand for services these days, not products. We have more demands for service. Like I said, we need communication, we need banking facility, we need educational facilities, and we need support services. For primary and secondary sectors, we need supporting activities. So that is why service sector is seeing a large amount of growth in the share towards GDP. Like majority of our people, you can just imagine how IT sector is booming in our country. Many of the college going students or who have just passed out are looking for some IT companies to hire them, and mostly in the service sector, because a large number of opportunities are coming, and also they pay a larger proportion of salary. So income level is something that is also contributing to have the people joining tertiary sector or value production of service sector in the GDP. Income level is rising. Because our income level is rising, we are looking forward to some kind of services. Like in our previous generation, maybe our grandfathers or grandmothers, they would have not thought about going to hotel and having a food. They won't be visiting any restaurants very often. But look at us. We may be visiting many restaurants at least once in a month, not even one. Like there are people who go once in a week or maybe daily to restaurants. Because when our income have started rising, or incomes have increased, we are looking for some kind of a services that gives us pleasure. So we are going for dining out, we go for entertainment, we go to theaters, and we go to shopping malls for maybe necessary or unnecessary thing, we do visit shopping malls. So with the level of income rising in the population, in the people, among the people, the demand for service is also increasing. And when we spend a large amount of shopping, we need to understand that that is actually contributing to the GDP of our country. And medical facilities, it's not like 10 or 20 or 30 years back. Now we have a wide range of medical facilities. We can approach any hospital for a routine checkup, which was not very common in during our grandparents' days. They never went for a routine checkup, but today's generation are more going for routine checkup in hospitals. So these are all services that are being availed by us because our income levels are increasing. So another reason which is contributing to the growth of tertiary sector is rise in income among the people. And over the past decades, new services have also arrived. One is definitely the telecommunication. So in early 90s or in the 1980s and all, we would not have thought, or the people would not have thought about smartphones. They would not have thought about internet or getting connected through these video calls. Now, from any part of the world, we can directly call a person through video call and check their whereabouts, etc. But like 20 or 30 years back, this is not something that people would have even thought about. So there are new systems. Now there is artificial intelligence coming up, robotics coming up, machine learnings are coming up. So there are more progress going to happen when we become the next, when the next generation come. There may be more services that adds into our economy or the global world. And that is why the tertiary sector is getting a higher advantage or higher income advantage to the GDP of our nation. And this is not just the case of India. Many other countries also, the tertiary sector has started contributing a large because of new facilities coming up, new kind of services coming up in the last many decades. So, but at the same time in India, when we look at the tertiary sector, the tertiary includes many kinds of services like insurance, banking, health, teaching, warehousing, transportation, etc. But even though as a whole, tertiary would be contributing large to the GDP, only certain sectors in the tertiary sector is contributing better. One should be the education industry, one will be the telecommunication industry. But at the same time, there are industries which have very low level of income and very low level of people employed in it. So there is a disparity also inside the tertiary, which is not part of this chapter. We may be studying it in the main topics in our UPSC classes, upcoming UPSC classes. So I'll be discussing how the service sectors in India is employing many different kinds of people and how the disparity is happening between the sector. So share of sectors in employment, graph 3. In 1977 to 78 period, 71% of employment was in primary sector. But now in 2017-18, only 44% of people are employed in primary sector. Now, look at the tertiary sector. In graph 3, it shows in 1977-78, only 18% of the population was employed in the tertiary sector. But coming to 2017-18, 31% of the employment is happening in tertiary sector itself. So maybe after 10 or 20 years, this graph might go upside down with the tertiary sector having more employment, number of employment, and agriculture having less number of employment. But at this point, I would like to ask you one question. Is it okay if the number of employment or the employment rate increases in tertiary sector and the agricultural sector employment rate decreases? Is it a good indicator to India as a country having low number of employment in agriculture and high number of employment in tertiary sector? What is your opinion? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? What is your opinion? Anyone? What will happen if the primary sector has a very low number of employment and tertiary sector has a large number of employment? Maithili says no. Okay, Maithili, can you say why do you say no? Like it's not a good indicator. Why do you think it's not a good indicator? Okay. Maithili is saying that agriculture is the major occupation in India. Yes, one of the reason is definitely that in India, agricultural sector is definitely the largest sector in our country, and because a large number of population is also part of the agricultural community in our section, and also when the primary activities of the country reduces, or when people employed in primary sector reduces, it means the country as a whole is going to depend on the tertiary sectors for, so there will be more kinds of dependency on imports or some other countries, because tertiary sector is some or the other way have globalized, which we will learn in the fourth chapter when we are discussing globalization. We'll discuss it more, but over dependency on service sector means there is less number of agricultural production happening, and there will be less number of opportunities available to the agricultural community in our country, and which means the agricultural community will go behind in their developmental aspect. And because India is predominantly an agricultural economy, or population is mostly into that and mostly in the agricultural sector, we cannot have or an indication like where the employment opportunities are reducing in primary and increasing in tertiary might not be a good indicator to the nation's GDP and its developmental aspects. So government should be actually aiming to promote the upcoming generation or the current generation to contribute more into the agricultural aspects, and also, but at the same time, focus on tertiary sector's contribution. So that is why these days we find that government is coming up with a large number of subsidies and other economic fundings and income facilities for the agricultural community, the primary sector, because it wants to take the agricultural society in a country to move forward and contribute more to the country. So if you see the latest budgets, or if you come across the budgets of India, you can see that at least in the last 3 to 4 years, there has been a large amount of focus to the agricultural sector and the small scale and medium scale industries. To add to this, of course, SME is also having MSME, micro, small, medium, and enterprises together with agriculture is getting a large amount of attention, and the country as a whole is aiming to bring up more attention to the agricultural society and develop the agricultural community in our country, because one half of the workers are still employed in primary sector, but in primary sector, the agricultural sector, there is something called disguised employment. A large amount of disguised employment is happening, which means there are more number of people employed in the sector than the required one. So if only one person is required in the primary sector, there may be 2 or 3 or 4 people working in it. So there is no additional contribution made by the second, third, or fourth person, and because of which the disguised employment, the rate of disguised employment is high. We had discussed this in the last classes, so I would not be getting deeper into disguised employment. So disguised employment is a situation where there is more number of people employed in the sector than the required amount, and India is facing disguised unemployment to a greater level in the primary sector because of lower attention given to that particular sector in the country. And this is why in the recent periods, the Indian government has started giving more attention to the agricultural sector, and it is trying to bring down the disguised unemployment in this particular society. Now, how to create more employment? We see that there is large number of employment in tertiary sector and less opportunities in agricultural sector. So what can the government or the society as a whole to do more employment facilities? One of the best ways is to the government can tackle this issue is by spending more amount or providing more funding to these sectors through banks or through other facilities. So one of the major ways now the government is supporting primary sector is by spending money and offering different kinds of loans through banking institutions to the population. So there is a picture like in the left side which shows a lady, her name is Lakshmi in this chapter. So she is a farmer. I'm taking the example given from this chapter. She's a farmer. She's from a very poor family. She has a husband and three children. Take, for example, she has three children and a husband who have a large amount of land, but they are very poor. So they are able to cultivate only small seeds and they take it only for their personal needs. They don't have the facility to cultivate in their entire land, and they cannot therefore have surplus which they can sell into the markets. So when this government is actually supporting them through some kind of credit facilities or banking facilities, people like Lakshmi can avail such facilities. And when government is providing such facilities, it should also focus that it gives such facilities at a lower level of interest, because debt always comes with interest. Whenever there is a loan, there is an interest payment to be paid back. So when the government or the banking institutions give loan or credit facilities at a lower level of interest, people like Lakshmi can actually avail such facilities. And with that facility, with that amount, she can actually think about cultivating more crops, because crop cultivation is not just seeds. It needs other facilities like irrigation facilities, fertilizers, and many other things to be incorporated for getting good crops. So that is why the cost of agriculture, cost to produce crops is comparatively higher. So when they are getting better money facility or credit facility, such farmers like Lakshmi can avail the funding, and because it's very low interest level, they need to pay back only a little less amount compared to the market rate, and they'll be able to cultivate better crops in their land, and they can sell the surplus to the markets. And with more cultivation, it will mean that her husband and the three children that I took as an example can participate in the agricultural activities and gain prosperity in their life. Now, at the same time, the farmers or the agricultural community, they face another issue. What if the crops are destroyed due to some kind of like a famine or some kind of natural calamities? So they become in debt. The indebtedness increases. They become debt struck. So while providing money facilities also or loan facilities also, the government and banking facilities should also ensure that in terms of or in cases of some kind of natural calamities or unanticipated calamities or events, such farming societies or agricultural societies are supported. That is why we see that at times of floods or famine or even COVID-19 situations like COVID-19 pandemic, the government or the banking institutions write off the debts of the farmers, because they understand that farmers are living on the base of their crop cultivation. So if any bad event happens, their crop cultivation gets affected and they won't have enough money to pay back. So in one way, the government is supporting by writing off the debts. So providing loan and supporting them during calamities is one way of creating more employment opportunities in the agricultural sector. And at the same time, government should also promote other semi-manufacturing or small-scale, medium-scale enterprises to join hands with the agricultural sector and take their products to more people. So when such small scale and large scale industries support agricultural sector, the agricultural sector will have demand for its products, which in one way will also create more employment opportunities over there. So locating industries, that is why industries, mainly some of the industries go to rural or semi-rural areas. So that they can employ people over there and make use of the raw materials from the agricultural sector and convert it into finished goods. So there is a hand-in-hand association between the agricultural and the manufacturing sectors, which in a way also creates a better employment facilities. So this is another way in which the employment opportunities can be increased. And focusing on indigenous population, indigenous arts, like we have certain communities like for example, taking the case of Kerala, we have coir industry over here. Coir is something very much indigenous to our state. So if that's part of the agricultural plus manufacturing, so it goes hand in hand. Coir is part of the agricultural primary sector, but coir forms part of the raw material for coir products, which comes into the manufacturing sector. So when these two industries join hand in hand, there is a support to the indigenous community who is depending on coir as their livelihood, and at the same time it creates more opportunities also. So focusing on indigenous arts and indigenous communities is also another way of creating more employment. So the Niti Aayog, which is the planning commission, which was replaced by the planning commission, estimated that 20 lakh jobs actually can be created in the education sector alone. So why? Because the Niti Aayog finds that education sector still has a large number of employment opportunities for teachers and non-teaching staff. But since some of the states in our country is not much focused on education sector, these employment opportunities are still are like not utilized. So they say that if the entire states in the country focuses on the education system alone, we can create around 20 lakh of jobs, which means there are more number of teachers employed, which means there are more number of non-teaching staffs employed. So that is one way of creating more jobs. And even focusing on services like tourism. Indian states majority, like for example, Kerala, Gujarat, Maharashtra, you can see advertisements, Gujarat, Maharashtra, etc. States like them are focusing largely on tourism also these days, because tourism is in one way giving more employment opportunities and at the same time attracting more income to the state. So it is contributing to the developmental aspect of the state as well. And there are programs or schemes like MGNREGA, which is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2005. There are certain acts like this which have guaranteed that people in the rural community have at least 100 days of work, which means the government is trying to support people in the rural area by ensuring that they have at least 100 days of work in a year, which means they are getting employed or they are getting income for those 100 days. And if they are not, if any person under this act, who's covered under this act, is not getting 100 days of employment, the government is even supporting them by providing unemployment allowances. So this is another way of creating more job job opportunities in our country. So we have many different kinds of ways in which the national government is trying to create more opportunities in the state. This is just a basic introduction to the chapter. When we get into the detailed syllabus of the UPSC in Indian economy, we'll cover up all these aspects. And to end up, there is also another act called Right to Work, which Indian government has focused. So the central government of India has made sure that there is a right to work, and around 625 districts in India has been covered under this act, and it is part of the MGNREGA Act of 2005 that these 625 districts ensure that there is a right to work to its people, and majorly this act focuses on the rural population because we have large number of rural population in our country. So with this, we come to the end of this chapter. Is this clear to all of you, what I have covered till now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And before ending, one more thing I would like to add to this is when we look at the sectors, we have primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. And even there, we have another kind of classification called organized and unorganized sector. So when you look at organized sector, it constitutes people who are working in companies or in organizations where they have some kind of job security. There is some kind of rules and regulations ensuring that they have minimum wages and they have a limit of work like 48 hours in a week or 50 hours in a week. And if they work more than that particular hour, they are getting over, like they are getting payment additional, double payment for the additional hours that they work. So we have organized sector as well as unorganized sector also in our country. Organized sector is where people have job security, where people have some kinds of rules and regulations protecting their rights, and income is also quite stable in organized sector. But again, when we look at the Indian population as a whole, a large number of people are employed in unorganized sector. Unorganized sector, take the case of a shopkeeper or people who help as housemaids. They are all part of unorganized sector. So why it is called an unorganized sector? Because there is no particular law protecting their rights to work and their employment opportunity availability also, and they don't have any kind of minimum wages or minimum number of works. There is no kind of a protection given in these aspects, and there is no job security also. So unorganized sector is again a largest sector, or a largest contributor in our GDP. But what happens is, when people are part of unorganized sector, there is disparity of income and there is a large level of inequality happening. So organized and unorganized sector, having a balance between organized and unorganized sector is also important in any economy. We cannot avoid having an unorganized sector, or we cannot just alone depend on organized sector. There needs to be organized as well as unorganized sector. But moving forward to a developed economy, it means that there is a balance between organized people working in organized and unorganized sector. Now, there is a trend also in countries like India. What happens is, even companies in the organized sector, they try to make many of their jobs into unorganized sector. For example, if I take the case of an IT company, say a case of an IT company, they normally don't take maintenance or cleaning aspects. Many of the companies do not employ permanent staff in their cleaning department. What they do is they take it on a contract basis from some kind of agencies. Now, why do they do that? This is in a way helping them to evade tax, and they don't need to pay the basic salary required or the minimum wages required for such people working in the cleaning or the housekeeping department. And they don't need to provide additional allowances like PF or ESI or some other kinds of facilities that the employees in organized sector is earning. So in one or the other way, these companies or entities in the organized sector is also contributing to the issues in the unorganized sector. So there are many issues to be tackled yet again for our country to move forward. One of which is large concentration on unorganized sector and less concentration on organized sector. So with this, we come to the end of this chapter. I hope it's clear. And there is one more chapter. I'll be just discussing 3 chapters today. So there is one more chapter on money and credit. I hope the first and the second chapters have been clear. So getting into the 3rd chapter, which is about money and credit. So money is something that everybody knows. Money is the medium of exchange that we use on a day-to-day basis. And yes, Maithili was saying PF and gratuity. Yes, Maithili, PF and gratuity. I think you were talking about the organized and unorganized sector. That's a good point. So yeah, we'll discuss more about the unorganized and organized sector in our upcoming classes of Indian economy. I've just taken a foundational thing in the previous chapter. Now, coming into the 3rd chapter, which is talking about money and credit. So in earlier days, like you would have already studied, it was barter system which was existing. And in barter system, there is something called double coincidence of wants. So what a person desires to sell is need not be exactly what the other person wishes to buy. So there was this issue of double coincidence of wants. Like if I am selling a shoe, maybe the other person will be giving me back in return as grains, which may not be meeting my needs. So in barter system, the issue was that this double coincidence of wants had to be balanced. And when the barter system failed to do so, money or the currency came as a medium of exchange. And when the money became a medium of exchange, it was successful in eliminating this need of double coincidence of wants. So there is no longer necessary for a person like selling shoes to demand for grains or wait for the other person, the buyer, to give something that the shoe the seller requires. So when money as a medium of exchange came in, the double coincidence of want got eliminated, and there is a transparency or an equality in the level of buying and selling happening in the society. So money is definitely called a medium of exchange because it acts as an intermediate to the exchange process. So there is an equality in the exchange process. When I am buying something, I am paying the amount that is actually required for that particular product or service. And in modern era, the most common forms of current money are currency and deposits with banks. So in the previous decades, currencies were like in silver coins, gold coins, metallic coins, etc. But nowadays we don't have such gold and silver coins. We do have metallic coins, but mostly it is paper notes and the coins. So currency in modern economy comes in the forms of paper notes and coins. And towards 2023, when we look India as a country, we are moving into digital currency or a cashless economy. Though cashless economy is still a far way to reach, we have moved into a society where digital currency is also being promoted. So I would say modern form of currency involves paper notes, coins, and even digital currencies. So why is currency, have you ever thought why is currency actually accepted as a medium of exchange in our country? It is because the government has approved it, or government has a law which states that, which has legalized the use of rupee as a medium of payment. So we have a law which has been actually legalized in our country, which says that Indian currency is, and that too in certain denominations. We don't have all denominations available here, but there are certain denominations, and the government of India, together with its apex bank, which is the RBI, has legalized the use of rupee as a medium of payment. And the law also says that one person cannot refuse settling transactions in India in any other forms other than rupees. That is why we trade in rupees. We buy products and services in rupees within the country's territory. We don't have any other form of currency in our state. That's because there is a legalized transaction, or there is a law governing such use of Indian rupee in our country. And it is the Reserve Bank of India which issues the currency, and no authority other than the Reserve Bank of India, which is the apex authority, can issue currency on behalf of the central government. So RBI is definitely doing this on behalf of central government, but no other institution other than RBI has the right to issue currency in our country. And currency, apart from currency, we also have deposits with banks, which acts as modern forms of currency. And it is quite noteworthy to find that when we deposit money into the bank, the banks actually keep only 15% of deposits with them, and the rest they give it to outsiders, or they give it to people or companies or institutions who are looking for credit facilities. Because what happens is, if the bank keeps the entire deposit with them, there is no other way that the bank can give us interest. So the cycle works like this. When we go to the bank for deposit, the bank keeps it as a fixed deposit, or a different forms of deposit. We have like savings account, current account, and fixed accounts. We also have many other forms of accounts these days. So what the bank does is, they take the money on behalf of us, they put it as a deposit over there, and they take part of the deposit and give it to people who are looking for loan or looking for credit. So what happens is, when the credit is given, there is a larger interest that the bank receives, say 10% of interest for a person looking for some kind of a personal loan. So the bank is getting 10% interest from that person, and as a depositor, maybe the bank needs to give me only 4 to 5%. So when I am getting 5%, the bank is getting actually 10% from the external authority. So the balance 5% is the profit for the bank, and that is where banking institutions earn money. So this is the cycle. This is the monetary cycle that functions in a society, and that is where banking institutions act as stabilizers of economic development in a country. It acts as a mediator of deposit and lender, borrower, between the depositor and the borrower. It supports people to gain better interest for their deposits and to earn better income on their deposits, and at the same time it supports people who are looking for credit. So this is a banking institution's role in the Indian economy and in the global economy as well. So deposits with banks and currency are the modern forms of money. And when comes to deposits of banks, we should also know that we have something called check facilities, which the banks provide. This is an example of a check payment system. So if we need a larger amount to be withdrawn from our account, say for example more than 20,000 or 1 lakh rupees, we can just give a check to the bank stating the name of the person and the amount required, and the check will be processed by the bank, and it's a paper instructing the bank to pay a specific amount to the bearer of that particular person. And like you can see, there is something called account pay. The left side, if you can see, there is something called account pay. So for those who don't understand what is this account pay check, if there is something called account pay or a cross check, this will mean that the bank cannot directly give the cash to the person holding this check. They need to deposit it into the account of the person. Like for here, it's written Prem Kumar. So if there is a cross check, Prem Kumar's account should be credited with 57,000 and Prem Kumar will be able to withdraw it. But if there is nothing like account pay, if there is no crossing like this, it means it is a cash check. So whoever goes with this check, whether it is Prem Kumar or some other person, they can directly go to the counter, gets it encashed, and from the cash counter itself, they will get it as cash. So we have different kinds of check, but the most common forms of check that we use today are cash check and this cross check. Just adding to this for those who don't understand. And loan activities of banks, I had already discussed. So depositors go to the bank, they make the deposit. With this deposit, the bank, you can see it is in this picture, the bank gives to people, to the borrowers. So the borrowers pay loan with the interest, and from this interest, the bank keeps up its profit, and the remaining it gives to people who withdraw it, who deposit it in the form of interest. And in this way, banking activities also support the economic development of a country. Now, credit facility, which means borrowing of funds, it can act as a curse as well as a benefit. So you would have already heard about people who have taken loans and got debts and have thought about like suicides. A large number of suicides are happening, especially among the farming society. A large amount of suicidal cases are happening because of loan facilities that they have taken. It's not just the agricultural community, but also in some other communities like business people also get into debts. Now, why is credit acting as a negative influence for them? So there is an example which is given in this chapter, Swapna's problem. So Swapna is actually a small scale farmer, and she grows groundnuts on her 3 acres of land. So what happened is she took a loan from a money lender to meet the expenses of the cultivation. But what happens is she invested the amount in the land, but midway the cultivation got affected. The crops were hit largely by pests, etc., and the crops failed. So what happened is, though she invested the amount borrowed from the money lender into her land, she was not able to produce the goods or cultivate the crops or cultivate the groundnut as expected. So what happened is ultimately she invested the land, but she was not able to harvest what was expected out of it. Now, in this case, credit is actually acting as a negative influence on such people. So credit can play a negative role in the situation. At the same time, credit is not a bad thing, or loans are not a bad thing if used in a good manner. So when does credit act as a positive influence in the society? For example, take the case of a business person or a festival season. There is an example given here which says about festival season. Salim is a trader, and he is a large scale trader who sells shoes. And he knows that during festival seasons, the demand for shoes is very high. So what he did is he wanted more workers to work during the seasonal time, and he wanted to procure more raw materials. So Salim, what he did is he took loan, but with that loan, he invested into his shoe manufacturing sector. He recruited many people, and he sold more than 3,000 shoes than targeted. And from that income, he was able to pay back the loan that he has taken. So credit acts in positive as well as negative manner in a society, and utilization of credit in the best possible manner is important for people in every society. So whenever we as society members, or whenever we as individuals go to take credits from people or from money lenders or from banking institutions, we should be able to guarantee that we are using it in a positive way and not in a negative way. But for communities like agricultural sector, like in this case of Sapna, it is unpredictable. Like they can't say if their cultivation will be affected or not. And in such situations, actually governments should come into help. But for other people like business people or individuals who are taking credits, government do not support. So credit facilities for agricultural purposes should be taken in a positive manner, and there the role of government is very important. That is why credit's positive and negative influence has been discussed in this chapter. And terms of credit, there is another thing called terms of credit. Now, there are certain people in our society which do not avail banking loans at all, or they don't have eligibility for banking loan. Now, why is that happening? Especially in the agricultural sector and especially in the unorganized sector, many people are not able to get loans from banking institutions. Why is that? Because there is something called terms of credit. So for every banking institution or an institution which provides money on the basis of the regulations provided by RBI, there are certain terms of credit. One is that there is a specific interest rate which has to be paid by the borrower on the on the credit amount taken. Next is there needs to be a collateral security against these loans. So collateral is as a kind of asset. It should be an asset. Actually, collateral should be an asset that the borrower owns, not borrower's family members or friends own, but the borrower owns, like land, building, jewelries, especially gold, vehicles or livestock. For farmers, it is livestock, and even deposits with banks. So these collaterals are to be given by the borrower to the bank. Now, why is bank insisting on collateral? Because if in any situation, if the borrower is not able to pay back the credit amount taken from the bank will use the collateral to recover the debt from them. So terms of credit includes the interest rate which the borrower has to pay. Second one is the collateral. Yeah, somebody was writing. I was reading Maithili. No owned lands and properties or assets. Yeah, I'll come to that. So collateral is an asset. Collaterals are necessary. And the third thing is there needs to be documentations also. Now, there are people who don't have collaterals at all. They don't have their own land. They won't have their own vehicles or buildings or livestock or any kind of deposits with banks. And such people are who approach money lenders. Because when you go to the banking institutions, you need to have some kinds of collateral. Even for personal loan, you need to have a collateral security in terms of your bank account and salary statement or ITR. So there are people, especially in the unorganized sector, who make day-to-day earnings. They don't have any kind of collateral, especially farmers also. The people living in agricultural community, they don't have any kinds of collateral with them. And such people are who get exploited by money lenders. Now, what happens is when they don't have collateral and when they go to the money lenders, money lenders definitely provide them with funding or with the credit facility, but they charge a very high rate of interest. So money lenders, if the bank is providing the loan for 4% or 5%, the money lenders might ask for 10 or 12% of interest from these people, knowing that they are in a vulnerable situation. So what happens is people who take money from the money lenders, especially poor and small income groups, they end up paying this loan in their lifetime. So in the last 10 or 20 years, or at least in the last 10 years, when you look at the country, Indian economy or Indian government's initiatives, it has taken so many initiatives through which people's dependency on money lenders are getting reduced. People who don't have collaterals also are now able to get credit facilities from our country. So when you go to the banking institutions, these three terms of credits, one is payment of interest, another is collateral, and documentation. Documentation is one of the biggest like hurdles that everybody has to pass through, especially if it's for housing needs or if it is for business needs, setting up of business or expanding a business. A large number of documentations, large number of paper documents need to be submitted to the bank. Many people won't have that. But what if the money lenders are exploiting them? That will affect our economy as a whole. So how to protect people from money lenders? That is where initiatives like self-help groups. Have you heard about self-help groups, SHGs? Anybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So we have this facility called self-help groups. In Kerala, one of the biggest examples is Kudumbashri. So I don't know about the other states because I'm not aware about the name used in the other states, but almost all states of India have something called self-help groups. Now, what these self-help groups do is they have a pool of 15 to 20 people, and who do not have these kinds of collaterals or documents, much of documents, but who need some kind of funding or some kind of credit facility to have a better lifestyle. So what they do is, each of these 15 or 20 members, they contribute their savings, say 25 rupees or 10 rupees or 50 rupees per month or 100 rupees per month. They contribute to the self-help group and they create a fund. And keeping this fund, the members can actually take loan from that particular fund that has been created by SHGs itself, not depending on the bank. So self-help groups begin by collecting small amount from their group members on a monthly basis, and they make it into a pool. And from that pool of amount, the members can take small loan facilities at a very minimal rate of interest. Of course, SHGs also charge interest, but it should be like nominal interest, very minimal interest, like 1% or 2%, which the members can actually afford. And over the period of 1 or 2 years, when this loan facilities increase or the contributions by the members increase, banking and financial institutions, government has instructed banking and financial institutions to support SHGs which are with a good record in the last 1 or 2 years, to provide them with credit facilities without any kind of collaterals or without any kind of much of documentation processes. So because of their role in supporting poor and small income families, SHGs are gaining a large amount of significance in the community. So SHGs is one way through which the borrowers are able to depend less on money lenders, and at the same time they are able to overcome problems of lack of collateral also. So in SHGs, a requirement for collateral is very low, and what if one person makes a default? Now that is another issue which might come in SHGs, but government says, or the authorities governing SHG says that because it's a very small number of members, like 15 to 20, they take responsibility of each other. So if one person is making any kind of default, the other group members will take that case into their interest and will go behind the person making default, and some or the other way they will try to cover up or manage the default. So it is the trust that the SHGs have, or the trust kept on the SHGs, that has helped SHGs to come up forward and support people without collaterals and documents to gain money or credit facilities for a better lifestyle. So SHGs are acting as building blocks to our community or our society, and especially this is largely observable in rural India more than urban. Of course, SHGs are there in urban India, but majority of the SHGs are in rural India. That's again because poor and small income families or farmers are mostly found in rural sectors of our country. So SHGs, what people or who have no collaterals or who do not have the terms of credits can avail facilities from SHGs. Now, this is a chart which has been produced to understand what the dependency of people on money lenders and banking institutions. So in the first chart here, as you can see, if it's a poor household, 85% of the people, they take it from informal sector. Now, this informal sector is a sector which is not governed by any kind of banking apex authorities, which includes money lenders. And formal sector is where our banking institutions are employed, like the organized and unorganized sector. Even in credit facilities, we have formal and informal sector. Formal sector is where we have banking and financial institutions which are governed by RBI, and they cannot do anything besides what RBI has regulated them. But there is this unorganized sector where money lenders, individual money lenders or organizations exist, and they lend money according to their own terms and conditions. So when we look at poor households, it's actually shocking to find that 85% of population or the poor households depend on credit from the informal sector. Only 15% depend on credit from the formal sector. And this is mainly because they don't have this collaterals or any kinds of documents. And households with few assets, if we don't have any kind of assets, or if the households have no assets, again, 53% of them are depending on informal sector. Only 47 is actually depending on formal sector. But coming to well-off households, like people who have fixed job and who have this collaterals or who are good, settled in their income level, as you can see, 72% depend on formal sectors because they understand the exploitation from the informal sector, and only 28% actually depend on informal sector. And if it's a very rich household, 90% of them go to the formal sector, which is your banking institutions, to get the credit facility, and only 10% goes to money lenders. Now, money lenders or existence of informal sector is actually a very negative situation in the country, and SHGs, activities or initiatives like SHGs are bringing down people's dependency on informal sector. And providing cheap and affordable credit to its population is one way through which governments and the apex banking authorities can support the developmental goals of a society. And yeah, this is another chart which shows graph 1. This shows the dependency of credit in rural households. So in 2012, when there was a survey taken, as you can see, money lenders, 33% of people, rural households in India actually depended on money lenders. Only 25% have depended on bank. And another thing is that cooperative societies and banks also exist in rural society, of course, especially in the rural households. And cooperative societies are also acting as supporting system to the lending or the credit facilities of the people. Cooperative society I have already discussed in the previous class, so I'm not taking it once again. But the role of cooperative society is also important in our society to bring up or develop or progress, help a community to progress towards better living conditions and better developmental goals. So this is the situation. So money lenders are gaining an upper hand in the rural credit systems in the rural households, and with initiatives like SHGs and many other facilities like Mudra loans, etc., government is trying to bring down the dependency on money lenders and stabilize income facilities or in credit facilities for its population. So with this, we also come to the end of the third chapter, taking the one last example, which I would like to quote in, which is given in this chapter. There is an example given about Grameen Bank of Bangladesh. So it is one of the biggest success stories. So generally an economy or a society or a nation thinks like credit facilities to its poor community will affect its economic development. But this was actually this concept was broken by Grameen Bank of Bangladesh. So Grameen Bank of Bangladesh was established in 1970s, and it was focusing on supporting the poor people in its community to give credit at reasonable rates. And Grameen Bank in 2018 Grameen Bank of Bangladesh, which was established in 1970s, when it took a survey in 2018, it found that over 9 million members and 81,600 villagers in Bangladesh are depending on Grameen Bank of the country for its credit facilities. And with that, borrowers have proved that not only poor reliable borrowers, but they can also start, like for example, it's the poor people can get credit facilities, and they can start and run small income generating activities successfully. And this person who established Grameen Bank, Professor Muhammad Yunus, was the recipient of 2006 Nobel Prize for Peace as well. So his statement was that if credit can be made available to the poor people on terms and conditions that are appropriate and reasonable, these millions of small people can add up to biggest developments for an economy. So Grameen Bank is an example. Grameen Bank of Bangladesh is an example where credit facilities to the poor people can also support in the national development aspects of every society. So with this, we come to the end of 3 chapters today. Any doubts or any clarity that anybody wants in these chapters? The next 2 chapters I'll be taking coming Wednesday, because that would give a margin for you to just go through these chapters and come up with doubts if you have. So any doubts or any clarity that any person requires in these 3 chapters? Have you all understood? Devnandana, Reshma, Maithili, have you all understood what we had discussed today?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so can we wind up today's session? We'll continue the next 2 chapters on Wednesday and complete grade 10 economics also. And with this week, we'll come to an end of NCERT 11 and 12 as well. So if there is no other doubts or no other questions, thank you all for attending the session. We'll continue this session on Wednesday at 7 p.m.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.